Moments FC strike again, and it's. I think I'm sorry to say, I think it's another poor performance from Brighton, as they go to Molineux and draw 1-1 in the end with Wolverhampton Wanderers. Welcome back to Seagulls Central. My name is Adam MacDonald, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thank you very much for clicking on this video. And if you are new here and you've not been here before, thank you very much for coming along. And if you've been here before, you're a long-standing member of this community. Thank you for coming back. I really, really appreciate you. As I always say, if you've found yourself coming back to this channel and you've not already done it, hit the subscribe, turn your notifications on. You'll never miss a video. We're first, fastest, and the best reaction to all Brighton Hove Albion content. And we've got an interesting game to get into today, and an interesting kind of conversation in general, I think, to have around where Brighton are. Because, you look, I think a point away from home, a point on the road is never a bad result in the Premier League. We all know, we've spoken about it so many times, how difficult it is to get points in the Premier League. And I think given the game, given how kind of poorly Brighton played, I think we have to start this by saying that actually I think a point is a decent result. You know, a point is always a good point. However, within this context, you know, it's interesting because we kind of rescued a point in this game, getting a kind of fairly late goal, but actually it is 2 points dropped. So you think about the way Brighton were, you know, putting a lot of pressure on Wolves, the way that Wolves kind of seemed like quite a poor side. But really, despite the fact we had a lot of possession, despite the fact we kind of flattered quite well, we kind of knocked the ball about okay, we kind of were quote unquote dominant for periods. We didn't look that impressive, I don't think. I don't think we looked like we had that much control over the game. I don't think we didn't look like we had a real playing style. And, you know, I said it at the start of the video, moments FC strike again. And I think this game is just a real sobering example for me in terms of how this team plays under Hurzeler. You know, I've spoke about it so many times, and I'm at pains to kind of make the point again because I'm concerned I come across too negative on Hurzeler. But I think it's another game where we're just seeing that I think we should be getting more out of these players. I think with the brilliant attacking players we've got, we seem to play with no kind of collective cohesion, no clear style of patterns of play. You compare it to previous managers we've had, where you can really see what we're trying to do in the way we play. Today, particularly, it just felt like kind of each player in attack was kind of just doing what they can themselves. We were getting the ball in the box. It was a kind of hit and hope job. It was quite aimless at times, you know, knocking the ball into spaces that we hoped players could get on the end of. And clearly, you know, it worked in the sense that we managed to get back in the game. We got the equaliser, but long term, you know, you're not seeing a really interesting, productive style of play that's getting the best out of your attacking players. And you know, maybe it's difficult when a team like Wolves, you know, who aren't great, you know, put a lot of men behind the ball, and you're forced to kind of really just break it down. And how do you do that? Maybe you do just lump balls into the box. But it feels again like we're a moments team. It feels like we rely on individual moments to get us out of jail, get Hurzeler out of jail, you know, get the results. Even last week, you know, which was a very good performance for Brighton, you kind of reflect on it. And it was a kind of moments game there as well. Brighton weren't necessarily the best team. I think if Chelsea didn't have 10 men, you know, there are many games where Brighton just get the odd goal. There's moments of individual brilliance. And it's something I've brought up last season a lot. And I think we're seeing it again. I think it was, you know, it was a poor performance from Brighton today, particularly the first half. I thought it was a very poor performance. Brighton playing with no kind of cohesion. I think they looked quite weak at times off the ball, getting bullied by the Wolves defenders. A number of quite poor performers. You obviously saw Baleba, who got hooked at half time for Jorginho Rutter. I don't think it was necessarily that Brighton players had like overall terrible games collectively. I think maybe Baleba didn't have his best game. But other than that, kind of the players weren't necessarily poor. It's just it didn't feel like what we were doing had any purpose. It felt like a kind of team had just all been chucked together and went kind of, right, lads, just play, just go out and play, go and kind of make something happen. And I'm still not really seeing anything. And, you know, the first half particularly was very poor. I thought Brighton, you know, the goal that we conceded, we'll get onto in a minute, was a poor goal to concede. It was sloppy. It was kind of poor from Welbeck, really, in the way he defended it. But But other than that, you know, we were weak in midfield. We were getting bullied off the ball. Our transition was poor. They were playing through our midfield very easily. Someone like Ayari, who I actually did think have a good game, you know, was in a midfield where we were just getting completely overloaded in that first half, and it was end to end. We were giving away really kind of poor chances to concede, and actually on a different day I think Wolves should have won it. You know, you think about that second half chance they had through Strand Larsen where he hit the post. Van Hecke kind of got done. There were other examples as well where either way, like whether Brighton got the kind of draw, got the win, got the loss, whatever the result would have been, the way they played, I don't think how I'm unsure how Hurzeler can kind of look at that and say he feels that's a positive performance, a positive where we necessarily dominated the game, or particularly played well, or kind of had a foothold in the game. We looked okay, we had our moments, but what was it? It was a team that were basically going, right, we're 1-0 down, let's get balls in the box. Minteh on the left-hand side had like 3 players around him every time he got the ball. And his like modus operandi was basically just get the ball in his left foot. He's playing on the left side this time. Just get it in the box, put it on the head of Danny Welbeck, try and hit it into someone. And like, if they've got 11, 9, 10 men in the box defending, you know how that's going to go. And of course, okay, it ended up being able to result in something. You know, what I'd find interesting is, you know, if Hurzeler had said to the team, look, lads, you know, this is how we want to play this game. Wolves aren't particularly good kind of when it comes to crosses into the box. This is how we're going to attack them. I'd kind of go, okay, well, fair enough. That's actually kind of how we've played the game there. But it doesn't feel like that. It just feels like kind of a bunch of players put together who've been told, right, we've got to kind of get back into this game after we're 1-0 down. What do? Let's just pump the ball into the box and see what we can do. I think overall, if you're kind of going to talk about the way we're playing, I think, you know, I've seen fans saying the same. I was quite conscious of the fact that I might have been one of the only people being kind of maybe overly critical. I'm seeing a lot of the comments at the moment, people saying very similar things, lacking in creativity, a lethargic display. It was, I think, actually in terms of the intensity. You know, Fabian Hürzeler talks a lot about intensity. I think you've got to praise the side in the sense that they showed they showed that ability to keep going, to keep attacking, to keep trying to get at this Wolves defence. I think you've got to praise them in that sense. But like the pace we were playing at, the speed and intensity we were playing at, he just wasn't there. I think maybe you could say Hurzeler also kind of persisted with someone like Welbeck for too long, who was having a brilliant game last week, and I do still think he has a lot to offer this season. Really like Danny Welbeck. Didn't have his kind of best game this season. You know, persisted with him for too long. I think maybe we should have brought someone like Seamas on earlier. And I think if you look at those midfield options that we had in the second half, we only had the option to bring on Milner, who I thought was fine. But you think about if Baleba's not having a brilliant game, you know, what do we do at that point? You know, Jorginho comes on, but actually our midfield options, in terms of kind of bolstering that midfield and preventing us from getting played through, which we saw multiple times in this game, you know, we didn't really have any other options. You know, Ayari was doing quite well. Wieffer was playing at right back. I don't think he would have had the physicality, the body, the legs, the energy to kind of counteract the kind of intensity that we were receiving in the middle of the park. And the first half particularly was very poor. I think the second half, you know, we managed to get that domination in the sense of having a lot of possession. And just wearing Wolves down. And maybe on another day we might have even gone on and got a winner, but it didn't feel like a game where we were playing well enough to kind of win the game. It felt to me like the players were playing with a kind of, you know, they're playing off their intuition. Do you know what I mean? As opposed to kind of any particular kind of style. The Van Hecke goal, a brilliant header, to be fair to him. I think you've got to say the changes that Hurzeler made in terms of bringing De Kuyper on clearly worked, in the sense that he was involved in the goal. Seamas was involved in the goal in terms of kind of heading it onto Van Hecke. So I think we've got to give some praise there. I think, you know, the cross from De Kuyper was very good, but it felt like that's just what we were doing all day, and surely at some point the mud was going to stick to the wall. And it did when Jan Paul van Hecke, brilliant header, him and Seamas both kind of muscling for it, kind of comes off Seamas, who I thought did pretty well in this game, kind of goes on to Van Hecke, and it's a big moment and we're back in the game. I think in terms of the goal we conceded, it was very poor defending. Again, a similar situation, kind of balls in the box. Danny Welbeck heads it out. The number one rule in terms of defending when you talk about heading a ball away, it's not head it back into the centre, is it? You kind of head it out either way. That's what you're kind of taught when you're growing up playing football. And it was just a very poor header from him straight into the middle of the box. And, you know, the Wolves player just had a completely clean hit at it. Verbruggen, very unlucky. I think he did make some other decent saves in this game. I don't think he's particularly a player that you can say played badly. You know, very unlucky in the sense that it just bounced off his back and it was a kind of very unfortunate own goal. You think about that David Stockdale goal. Was it at Norwich? Probably. God, that probably would have been 7 or 8 seasons ago now. Was that in the promotion season? Actually, I think we'd been promoted at that point. It was one of the final games of the season, the promotion season, if I'm not mistaken. And a very similar goal happened there. We lost quite heavily, I think, and the ball bounced off Stockdale's back. It was quite kind of a similar goal to that. Bounces off the back of Verbruggen. Those goals do happen. It's unfortunate. Elsewhere on the pitch, I mean, in terms of positives, I thought Ferdi Kadıoğlu, to be fair to him, had a pretty decent game. Minteh, again, was kind of the quote-unquote star of the show. I don't think you can necessarily say he was the star. I don't think he had like an unbelievable game, but he was the outlet for Brighton, as he always is. The work rate's brilliant. He's trying to get balls in the box. He's trying to make things happen. He's being double, tripled up on at times. It's difficult. Jorginho Rutter as well. I think he played well when he came on. Ayari, to be fair, I think he showed the intensity all throughout the game, the energy, getting back, making tackles. One of our players of the season so far, Ayari. So I think there were positives. Obviously, De Kuyper coming on, I thought was decent. Gruda, I thought was okay. I think, to be honest, I think at times he held onto the ball for too long. I think he probably should have given it a little bit more. I think he could have had a better game. I think he's still showing that rawness, that development. But overall, not a great game. Look, we got a point, and I think you can't be too negative. And I know this video probably has been quite negative, but I am concerned. It's something I've spoken about for a while, that kind of lack of real style of play. And you know, why is that important? You might say it's not important, it's just the points. But I don't know. I just don't. Sometimes I watch and just think, like, what are we doing? Like, we've got all these brilliant players, and like, surely we can get more out of them. And you know, maybe you have a different view to me. Maybe clearly the club have a different view to me, and I'm not necessarily banging the drum for anything to happen, but I just sometimes watch it and just think like, oh, we just kind of got out of jail again. And surely there's more to this squad than just that. I don't know. Let me know what you think. Were you at the game? Did you watch it again? What did you think? Was it as disappointing as I've made out? And do you think the performance going to this international break needs to be improved when we come back against Newcastle at home? I will be back in a couple of days to talk more about this game, more about the general conversations at Brighton Hove Albion, dig into the topics. We upload 3, 4, 5 times a week on this channel. So if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, turn your notifications on, get in the comments and let me know what you thought of this game. Thank you very much for watching this video. I'll see you on the next one. And as always, up the Albion.